Hi everyone, I'm Dr.Animaction, and as of the day I'm recording this video, it's Father's Day 2023. As such, I thought I'd take the opportunity to take a look at the fathers of 1980s action cartoons. The good news for me is that they're a lot easier to come by than mothers are in this particular form of media. The bad news is that the ones we had were actually often hands-off as dads and more interested in being a story device than a parent. One small rule change for this list is I prescribed the belief that a father contributes genetic material, whereas a dad is there for his kids, so this list will include father figures as well as biological ones. Also, as a dad myself, I'm probably going to be more critical of the entries here than I was for Mother's Day, as I feel I have more firm ground to stand on for criticism. As usual, if you love all things 80 and animated, make sure to like and subscribe. That all being said, let's go ahead and take a look at what the animation of the 80s had to offer for us as far as fatherly role models, and see who ended up being better than who throughout the decade. So I know I didn't do any dishonorable mentions on Mother's Day, but like I said, I'm a lot more comfortable passing judgment on my fellow fathers, and that's exactly what I'm doing with this entry. Matt Tracker from Mask. Sure, he may have seemed like a good father on the surface, as he was always patient and caring with his son, ready to help him with his problems and struggles. But where he absolutely fails, though, is as a disciplinarian. Now, I'm not endorsing any kind of harsh punishment for children, as I personally lean toward the stern voice and reteaching method of parenting, but I don't think Matt disciplined his son Scott at all. Every single episode, Scott did something to nearly mess up Mask's mission, some worse than others, and Matt just kind of boys will be boys. Kidnapped by Venom? Boys will be boys. Cause the destruction of a Mask vehicle? Boys will be boys. Get in the line of fire and end up with Hondo in a coma because he had to save your annoying ass? Boys will be boys. Okay, so maybe I'm putting Matt here because I absolutely hate Scott as a character, but if he were my son, I'd have at least hired a nanny or something to lock him down. Number 10 on this list is going to my first father figure entry, Chief Anderson from Battle of the Planets. This one is a scientific genius, acting as the head of intergalactic security, leader of G-Force, and adoptive father to Mark. He's also the polar opposite of Matt Tracker, as he's a stern, no-nonsense character that can be cold and harsh when he feels like it's appropriate. However, as he's been Mark's acting father since the leader of G-Force was 4 years old, we have to assume that he also volunteered the young man to undergo the cerebonic implant process and training that led to him becoming a science ninja. Seeing as Mark's only about 18 when the series takes place, you kind of have to wonder if that was a voluntary process for him and the other underage orphans on the team. Regardless of the events leading up to G-Force, now that they're here, Chief Anderson is their biggest supporter and believes wholeheartedly in their capabilities. Sure, he may keep his knowledge of Mark's real father's secret, and constantly throw the team into danger, and even sometimes micromanage Mark by overriding his orders. You know what? Why didn't I give this guy the dishonorable mention? Oh yeah, it's because, sketchy as the origins of the process may be, he turned Mark and the others into superpowered ninjas with awesome weapons and vehicles. The kid in me thinks that's a fair trade, even if the dad in me doesn't. My pick for number 9 this Father's Day is the ultimate homeschool dad, Dr. Benton Quest from Johnny Quest. He's one of the world's greatest scientific minds and works on some of the most dangerous projects and in some of the most dangerous environments in the world. Plus, he's a single father of not just his biological son, but of an adopted son as well. So what's a single globe-trotting parent that faces constant danger to do? Why, take his kids with him, of course. And that's why Dr. Quest is only down here at 9. Sure, Johnny and Haji got some unique opportunities that most kids in the world could never imagine, but they were also kidnapped and had near-death experiences more than any kid in the world could ever imagine. If not for the fact that Johnny was trained like he was a junior Batman or something, and Haji is both well-trained and has some mystical powers, they wouldn't have lasted past the first couple of episodes. At least Dr. Quest had Race there too, if not to keep an eye on the kids, then help save them when things inevitably went bad. In the number 8 spot is, oh, hey look, it's another super genius scientist. This time it's Dr. Elephant from Astro Boy, who not only isn't a biological father, but whose adopted son isn't even human. I would have put Dr. Tenma on the list, but when he first created Astro Boy to replace his original son, who'd been killed in a car accident, he actually ends up disowning him, and Astro ends up getting abducted by a circus. Keep in mind that we're primarily an 80s channel here, so I'm using the storyline from the 80s series and not the original. It was Dr. Elephant who rescued Astro and eventually replaced Tenma as the Minister of Science. He's the one who's always there to help Astro, teach him about humanity, and give him advice. He's also the creator of the Robot Bill of Rights that gives robots equal status with humans. He also ends up creating a robotic family for Astro, consisting of a mom, dad, and little sister. He's definitely the father that Astro deserved, so it was pretty gratifying to see him replace Tenma over the course of the show. So for number 7, I was going to put the husband of one of the characters on my best mothers list, but I chose to go with a different character from that same series. This spot goes to Major General Rolf Emerson from Robotech, specifically the Masters Saga arc. The reason I went with Rolf, who was Dana's godfather instead of her real father, is that he actually raised both her and her best friend Bowie from the time they were 10 years old. When Max and Miria, along with Bowie's parents, left Earth for what was only supposed to be a 6-month mission, Rolf and his wife Laura agreed to care for the children. Unfortunately, the SDF-3 expedition was lost, and Rolf and Laura ended up raising the kids to adulthood, where they both joined the RDF. Being the commander of the fleet during the Second Robotech War meant that Rolf often had to assign his godchildren to dangerous missions, and because of that, they kind of viewed him as cold and distant, especially Bowie. But he continued to care for and protect them as best he could throughout the series, eventually going so far as to die taking a blast that was meant for Bowie. He may have usually put duty before the pair, but that didn't stop him from caring for them and putting them before himself until the very end. So it looks like at this point we're pretty much done with the brainy science dads, as 6th place is another military type like Rolf. This position goes to Zachary Fox from the Adventures of the Galaxy Rangers. Zach is the first character on the list with a living wife and a pair of biological children, at least for the first episode. Unfortunately, Zach's wife Eliza ends up in a coma, with her mind trapped in a psychocrystal, making Zach a single parent. Not that he spends a lot of his time in the series actually parenting, as he's more often than not off on a ranger mission. That doesn't stop his family from being his main motivation throughout the series, though, as rescuing Eliza is always his main personal goal, and he continuously promises the kids he'll bring her back. We honestly don't see much parenting from him in the series, but his kids both seem happy and well-adjusted, and he never abandoned or experimented on them, which kind of gives him a leg up over the others we've already covered. He's just a dedicated, professional, military-minded family man, and I can respect that. Starting us out on the top half of the list is Man-at-Arms from He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, taking the number 5 spot. Is he a biological father? I guess it depends on what series you watch, but we're sticking with the 80s, so no, he isn't. But he's been a surrogate for Teela since the day she was born. As father of an adopted newborn, advisor to the King and Queen of Eternia, and commander of the Royal Guard, he actually did a pretty great job. Teela grew up to take over the duties of commanding the Guard as one of the most respected people on the planet. He also trained her to be one of its best warriors as well, capable of going toe-to-toe with any member of Skeletor's forces. He also usually acts like a second father figure to Adam, being one of only 3 people who know He-Man's secret identity. He makes excuses for Adam's absences, but supports his decisions and actions to his parents. We don't ever necessarily get to see much of him as a father so much as we do a mentor and confidant, but seeing how both Teela and Adam turned out, and how much they continue to admire and respect him, tells me everything I need to know about how well he filled that role. So number 4 is one I kind of have mixed feelings about. It's Ulysses from Ulysses 31. My mixed feelings aren't necessarily about his fathering skills, but rather a single decision he made as a father. In a universe where the gods are a known quantity, they definitely exist and they definitely have a petty and vengeful side, Ulysses chooses to rescue his son at the cost of pissing off those gods, and in the process screws over all of the other humans aboard the Odyssey. Talk about the quintessential representation of the trolley problem. He knew that the gods were probably going to go straight to the smiting after he defied them, but he did it anyway. I'm not saying that I wouldn't have necessarily made the same decision, and ideally I'll never have to, but I'm also not directly responsible for all of the lives on both tracks of that trolley problem. He knew that it was a matter of his son as the one, or his crew as the many, and he instantly and without regret chose the one. Does that make him a great dad? Yeah, probably, as he's obviously family first and damn the consequences, but Spock would have been terribly disappointed. And now we come to the podium, finding our 3rd place spot occupied by Jack Bennett, Bionic 1 from the Bionic Six. Jack's wife Helen topped the list of mothers, but Jack only gets to 3. Notice their code names. She's Mother 1 after all, but apparently he puts work first as Bionic 1. He still gets plenty of points for this ranking, as he is a dedicated family man, taking on the responsibility for not only his 2 biological children, but 2 adopted kids as well, and it's not like he ever wanted his entire family to become superpowered cyborgs. He was originally the only superpowered one of the group, but fate had some other plans, and his family were all critically injured by an alien attack while they were on a ski vacation. What are the odds? To save his wife and kids, Jack's mentor and Bionic One's original creator, Professor Sharp, implants them all with cybernetic upgrades as well. Jack takes it upon himself from that point forward to lead them and teach them about their bionic powers, making them the Bionic Six. He's shown several times throughout the series giving fatherly advice and filling the role, but not nearly as much as Helen was in the role of mom. He's also always willing to throw the team into dangerous situations, even when Helen may disagree. Is that because of his confidence in his family, or his dedication to the mission? It's not really clear, but the fact that the question can be asked keeps him at number 3. So I'm going to do one of those things that list viewers probably hate, but I'm giving the second place award as a 4-way tie. However, it's 4 characters who are all from the same series, so maybe that'll make it easier to swallow. It's Flash Gordon, the Phantom, Lothar, and Mandrake from Defenders of the Earth. Sure, they bring their kids into dangerous situations the same way Dr. Quest did, but their kids were all older than the supposedly 11-year-old Johnny, and they were all much more capable. So much so that these 4 dads, Flash, Phantom, and Lothar with their biological children, and Mandrake with his adopted son Cassin, treated them all as full-fledged members of the Defenders. Not only that, but they still ensured that the kids kept up with their normal lives and school commitments even while defending the world. And finally, each of these dads made sure that their kids were well-trained and capable in several areas, with Flash's son Rick being an expert pilot and world-class computer engineer, the Phantom's daughter Jetta being an excellent hunter and fighter and familiar with all aspects of nature, Lothar's son LJ being a world-class martial artist, and Mandrake's adopted son and apprentice being well on his way to learning Mandrake's mystic arts. For a group of single fathers who spend a lot of their time in space or saving the world, they were all pretty great dads. Before we get to number 1, there were a handful of other dads in 80s animation, not just action, who deserve a mention here. Xandor from the Herculoids, Commander Eagle from Saber Rider, Plastic Man, Pac-Man, Popeye, and the Pink Panther. That was a lot of alliteration right there. All had kids in one series or another throughout the decade. There were some classic dads like Fred and Barney or George Jetson, some less prominent father figures like Mr. T and Chuck Norris with their junior sidekicks, and even some tragic fathers like Captain Avatar from Star Blazers. My honorable mentions for this list, though, go to Papa Smurf and Dave Seville. It's not really clear how Smurf's reproductive processes work, or why there is initially only a single female Smurf, or why Papa is the only one significantly older than the rest of the population, but what is known is that he's a father figure to an entire village. He's the political and spiritual leader, the primary teacher, the arbitrator of disputes, and the wisest of all the Smurfs, and he does it all with grace and patience. Usually. And Dave Seville voluntarily took on the responsibility of raising a trio of giant anthropomorphic chipmunks. Sure, he may have originally done so to exploit their singing ability, but by the time we see him at the start of the series, he's a true father figure that's constantly pushed to his limits by Alvin, and constantly has to clean up the mess, both literally and figuratively, left behind by the trio's antics. He deserves an honorable mention just for putting up with that. And on that note, we reach our number 1 spot. I'm wondering how many of you have already guessed, so if you did, let me know in the comments. This character is not a biological father, but he's a man who dealt with significant personal hardship and tragedy, yet still in the midst of it all chose to take on parental duties. It's Hamato Yoshi, or as he's better known to all of us, Splinter, from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. I mean seriously, this guy had it rougher than any other character on this list even before he met the Turtles. He'd been disgraced by his rival and kicked out of his clan, lost the woman he loved, and ended up homeless in the sewers of New York City. If that wasn't bad enough, he was also exposed to a mutagen that turned him into a human-sized rat and ensured he'd never be able to return to regular society. But even after all of that, he was willing to adopt 4 baby turtles who had also been exposed to the same mutagen and turned into turtle-human hybrids. He raised them and trained them and gave them each a strong sense of justice and duty. That would have been enough on its own to get him up here toward the top of the list. But the real reason he ends up here is that throughout all of that, he managed to raise each of them as individuals, fostering their own personal strengths and interests, yet keeping them a cohesive unit in the process. Can you imagine trying to do that? Having quadruplets who all wanted to do different sports or activities that you had to juggle as a single parent with no experience? Forget earning the top spot on this list. Splinter should have earned sainthood. So that's it. My ranking of the top 10-ish fathers in 80s action cartoons. What do you guys think about my picks? There are plenty to choose from, but I had to make some assumptions or interpolations to really differentiate them in several instances. Agree with my logic and reasoning? Share your thoughts and ideas in the comments below. Time to wrap up this video though, so I'll wish you all a happy Father's Day in your own families. Check back later this week for 1987 and my animated 80s series. I don't know what my next alternating video will be, so feel free to cast your votes. And as usual, check out any of my other social media stuff or my book, all linked in the description, and like the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned and stay tuned, as in cartoons. Later.